Welcome to the program. My name is Jesse Peterson, and I am founder and president of a national nonprofit organization called BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. And our purpose is to rebuild the family by rebuilding the man. And rebuilding the family, we deal with every aspect of the family, every aspect. And tonight, we're dealing with abortion and the impact it is having or have had on the family. My guest tonight is George Brumder.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
Oh, that's cool. He's the board chair of Planned Parenthood of Pasadena. I appreciate you coming.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And Marcella Melendez. And you're not speaking on behalf of the Crisis Pregnancy Center tonight.
No, but I was director of a crisis pregnancy center for 6 years, and I have a lot of experience due to that.
Yes, and now you're with Hispanics for Life?
I'm a board member of Hispanics for Life, that's correct.
All right, I'm glad you came. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
You know, George, I want to start with you first, because I can't really understand. Oh, first, are you in favor of abortion? Well, you have to be if you're with Planned Parenthood. But I just wanted you to say that.
Well, actually, I don't say that I'm in favor of abortion. I'm in favor of abortion being accessible to people. I think it should be available in certain circumstances. That doesn't mean I would choose it for myself.
Okay,
or
let me
for
ask
some
this.
of my family.
Oh, so let me ask then, would you choose it for yourself or a member of your family?
That I can't say because I've never been in that situation. I don't know what I would decide if I were faced with those circumstances.
Okay. As a man, and the reason I ask this way, as a man, because not all, of course, but most men are logical in their thinking, whereas most women, not all, because we definitely have a logical woman here tonight, but most women make decisions based on emotion. As a man, how did you get involved with abortion and would encourage it in any manner at all? I mean, what changed your thinking as a logical man to an emotional thinking person?
I'm not sure I actually understand your question exactly, but Planned Parenthood doesn't promote abortion, if you think that it does. My being involved with Planned Parenthood doesn't mean that I promote abortion, but Planned Parenthood doesn't promote abortion.
When you say they don't promote it, what do you mean?
Well, Planned Parenthood does want abortion to be accessible and available so that in appropriate cases it's an alternative. But Planned Parenthood doesn't urge people to have abortions. It counsels people. If people come in and talk to them about their situation, Planned Parenthood doesn't say you should have an abortion. Planned Parenthood discusses the various options, which include having the baby put up for adoption, or terminating the pregnancy. Planned Parenthood's whole approach is non-directive counseling that gives the individual the information they need so they can make their own intelligent and presumably responsible choice.
What do you, and I'm coming to you, Marcella, what do you think about men who encourages a wife or a girlfriend or to have abortions, to have an abortion? What do you think about that type of a man?
I guess I wouldn't see any problem with that.
You wouldn't?
No.
Why not?
Well, why would I?
No, I'm saying why not? Why wouldn't you see a problem with it?
Well, because I think when if a child is conceived, it's equally the responsibility of its mother and its father. And the mother and father have to be concerned with the well-being of this child. And if they have other children, they have to be concerned with the well-being of their family. And in any case, they have to be concerned with their own well-being.
Okay, let me just, I'm sorry.
So it just seems to me that the father, as well as the mother, would have views on the subject, and they may be quite valuable. And I think they should be included in the equation if the father is interested and wishes to participate.
Okay, forgive me if I'm repeating myself. How did you get involved with Planned Parenthood?
Well, actually, I grew up knowing about Planned Parenthood. I grew up in Milwaukee, and Planned Parenthood existed in Milwaukee, and my parents, I think, supported it. They supported the idea of it. So I've long known of Planned Parenthood and thought it was a beneficial organization that did good things in the community. So, say 3 years ago when I retired from my work and had time and was asked if I would go on the board of the Planned Parenthood affiliate, I said rather readily, yes, I would, thinking that it might be interesting and might be of some value. I didn't know at the time really what it was going to mean for me.
Marcella, how did you get involved with the abortion issue? And what do you think about women and men, especially men? Because I really can't understand why a man would be in favor of killing his baby. How did you get involved, and what do you think about men who are in favor of that?
Well, first I'd like to answer the first question, which is how did I get involved?
Yes.
Personally, I was very naive about the whole issue. I really could not have told you what an abortion was until 13 years ago. And at that point, I received a telephone call from someone who called me because I also speak Spanish. And they wanted to talk to a young woman who wanted to talk about her abortion. She'd had a particularly brutal abortion, and she didn't speak English. So I offered to go ahead and respond to that call. And I had no idea even what an abortion was. So on the way there, I'm wondering, you know, how does someone approach a total stranger, knock on their door and say, tell me about your abortion? So this was quite a challenge. But what I heard just absolutely changed my life. What I heard was a 21-year-old Mexican girl that had gone to a health clinic. The term was Clínica de Salud, health clinic. So naturally, she thought she was going in for her health. Well, what resulted was that this abortionist attempted to take her baby, but he didn't check to see how old the baby was. Turns out the baby was almost 7 months old and only managed to get a leg, an arm, and the intestines of the baby. And it ended up leaving the rest of the baby in there because he could not take the rest of the baby, it was too big. So eventually ended up realizing he was going to kill the woman and had her taken to the county hospital nearby, where she was left there in the emergency room with a little note in her hand. And she almost bled to death. She said the blood was down to her feet by the time somebody realized this woman is dying here.
Right.
And they came and took her little note and they rushed her and into the surgery and removed the rest of the baby. Well, when I heard this, I was appalled. I thought, oh my God, what a horrible, horrible act. This is a criminal. How could he do this to a little defenseless child? So I was so appalled that I thought, I've got to help this girl get some justice.
Yes.
So I asked her, if I can get an appointment with a district attorney, would you go with me and tell him what you said to me? And she said she would. Well, it turns out that we did. I got an appointment, I picked her up and I took her. And after she told her horrifying story, he just shook his head and said, oh, I hear these stories every day. It's legal.
Wow.
And when I heard that, it absolutely did something to me.
I bet.
I realized then and there, babies are being killed, and someone has to do something. So with that, I began to find out everything I could about abortion because I knew nothing at that time. I was shocked. And I found out that even up to 9 months, babies can be killed in gruesome, horrible, painful methods. And anyway, it's really activated my life.
And what do you think about men that encourage or is in favor of abortion?
If they encourage, I think that either they're very selfish or perhaps scared, and don't want the responsibility. It's a big responsibility to have a child. I believe that many times it's a way out. I have been in the past 13 years in front of abortion clinics offering help to the women as they're going in. And I have seen young men, as a matter of fact, one that I'm thinking of right now, taking his girlfriend in and then walking out with her afterwards, offering her a cigarette and just with the biggest smile on his face like, yes, I'm off the hook. And the poor woman was just about to faint. But he had the biggest smile like a victory, you know. And so in that case, I would say he got off. He didn't have to pay for 18 years for that child. And so it was.
I think that men who encourages or allow their woman to have an abortion is a very weak and pathetic person. He's not a real man. And I think that that is one of the reasons that this whole abortion issue is out of control, because men have been pushed out of the issue. And whenever a man is not in favor of the family or an issue, it seemed to go the wrong way. It becomes very destructive. And that's why I think that real men need to get back into this issue in order to turn it around. Do you disagree with that?
Well, I think that we should keep in mind that organizations like Planned Parenthood, and I think does much that you would support and agree with, that both of you would, because a large part of what Planned Parenthood is doing is trying to prevent unintended pregnancies and thereby prevent the need for abortion.
When you hear that story, the story that Marcella just told us, what crosses your mind? How do you feel hearing that?
Well, obviously that's a very grotesque situation. I mean, a really terrible situation. I can't imagine what my reaction would have been had I been there. But after all, abortion basically as a procedure is an extremely safe one. Certainly it can be done safely and by knowledgeable people. Planned Parenthood, when it does abortions, only does them early in pregnancies. And they're one of the safest medical procedures that exists.
Let's talk briefly about the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. Can you give us a brief history of Margaret Sanger and her reasons for starting Planned Parenthood?
Well, yes, actually I think I can. I'm not sure it'll be totally brief. It'll have to be, because I actually don't know all that much about Margaret Sanger. But she was born to an Irish family in 1879, in September 14th of 1879. So tomorrow will be the 120th anniversary of her birth. And she was the middle of 11 children. And her mother died at a rather young age of tuberculosis, but at least Margaret thought her mother died at least partly because she had been, her health, I guess, had somehow been affected by having as many children as she had. I'm not sure how many she actually had. There were 11 who grew up to adulthood. There may have been more, I'm not sure. But in any event, Margaret became a nurse. And at some point, she encountered a woman lying in the woman's bed, covered with some sort of quilt. And it turned out that the woman had attempted to give herself an abortion. This was in the maybe early 1900s, something like that. She felt that she couldn't have another child. She and her husband were in very straitened financial circumstances, and she thought that they simply couldn't take care of this child. So she tried to abort the pregnancy. And actually there's a video that I have here that you can look at if you would like.
Margaret Sanger tried to abort.
No, this woman tried to abort her own child.
Okay.
And she had a mishap. I don't know really what happened. The woman, Margaret came because she was a nurse. She came to help this woman.
Hold that thought. I think, are we coming to a break or are we at a break? Okay, he said break. I thought we were at a break. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, Margaret was summoned by the family of this woman who was in her bed and presumably was, in fact, bleeding slowly to death. Her life was saved, and she died not too long after that, after having given herself, or attempted to give herself, a second abortion. And Margaret apparently was very much affected by witnessing this and by being a part of it. And what affected her very much was the fact that no birth control methods were apparently available. There's a scene in this video of the woman who was soon to be dead from her second self-abortion, begging Margaret to tell her what she could do to prevent herself from becoming pregnant. And Margaret could not tell her because at that time in the United States there was a national thing called the Comstock Act, or the Comstock Law, and various states had their own individual versions of this Comstock Law, and it prohibited not only the dissemination of contraception, but it also prohibited dissemination about information about contraception. So doctors and nurses and really nobody could really even talk about the subject of contraception. So Margaret Sanger's initial aim was to help women who would otherwise be in these predicaments where they would want to have an abortion
And was she
by
trying to
enabling
help?
them.
Was she trying to help all women or just a certain
She was
segment?
basically, I think, trying to help all women.
You're not sure? You said, I think?
I
You're not
think she
sure?
was trying to help all women.
Okay, when we come back, Marcella, I want you to fill us in the rest about Margaret Sanger. We'll be back in a moment.
Jesse Peterson is the founder of Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. For information, write P.O. Box 35090, Los Angeles, California 90035, or call 1-800-411-BOND.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Jesse Peterson, and we're talking about abortion. Marcella, tell us a little bit about Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that what George just described is completely different from what I'm going to say, because he was quoting from a biography, apparently in a video, but I'd like to quote from Margaret Sanger's own book called The Pivot of Civilization. And in that book, she calls for the elimination of human weeds. And human weeds, the reason she wants the elimination or wanted the elimination of human weeds was for the cessation of charity, for the segregation of morons, misfits, and the maladjusted. And she called for the sterilization of genetically inferior races. And when you continue to read throughout this book, you find out that the people that she's referring to are often Hispanics, blacks, and other minorities, the poor, anybody who's mentally retarded or in any way what she would consider to be a misfit or a moron. But this was her whole intent. The reason she wanted to sterilize and to abort and to contracept was not because she was so concerned about women dying from trying to abort themselves. She really was very much in favor of a white supremacist race. And in a paper she used to publish way at the beginning, The Woman Rebel, her slogan on the paper was, "No gods, no masters." She felt that she wanted to have full control of her life to do whatever she wanted, and she was very perverted. And she wanted other women to also enjoy the same perversions that she did. And she advertised her paper as a paper of militant thought, which it was. As a matter of fact, her paper ended up getting her in a lot of trouble, as George mentioned. There was a violation of the federal Comstock laws, which brought to her an indictment, and where she was indicted of 3 counts for publication of lewd and indecent articles. And what happened was she knew she would be found guilty and put in jail, so she, with the help of her friends, she ended up fleeing the country and going to Europe. And she remained in Europe to avoid prosecution. But when she came back, she ended up beginning her work, which was starting her counseling centers. She called them more contraceptive centers, birth control. But there was a lot more to that. She really wanted to change society. She wanted to give women the freedom to do whatever they wanted with their bodies, and began to attack marriage. She considered marriage to be a horrible condition for women. And so that was, and another thing I'd like to say also is that George seems to think that Planned Parenthood is about helping people, excuse me, and I'm sorry, I forgot the point that I was going to make, but he did refer to laws to help women and help the society. Well, I just printed out some stuff from their own internet today from the computer, and I got some information for teenagers, what Planned Parenthood offers for teenagers. And right here it says, do my parents have to know about it? And they're talking about contraceptives and abortions and so on and so forth. And the answer from Planned Parenthood to the teenagers is that no, notification is not required for birth control, pregnancy tests, prenatal care, or sexually transmitted disease testing and treatment. And then it goes on to say to the kids, it says, a quick note, when you reach voting age, you can ensure that future teens have the same access to information and medical care by electing politicians who will support access for teens. So one of the things they do very effectively is go behind the parents' backs, tell the children you have rights to all these things and we will help you. And also here in California just recently, there was a law that was passed by one vote which would put more school-based clinics in public schools so that kids can then go directly to Planned Parenthood and other organizations such as that and get these services behind their parents' backs without their knowledge or consent.
Amazing. Respond, George.
Well, you've said quite a lot, so it's difficult to respond to it all in a short time. But coming back to the subject of Margaret Sanger, if we can, because yes. I thought the program was entitled The Legacy of Margaret Sanger.
Yes.
I actually think I would never claim that Margaret Sanger was a saint.
So is this true what she just said about Margaret Sanger?
I don't know. I doubt if all that she said was true. I think there is some truth in what she said. Margaret Sanger did, I believe, espouse certain ideas like eugenics and other things like that in the 1910s or 20s, I think were sort of socially acceptable. They were more commonly accepted. And so it isn't quite as bizarre as it sounds if you think of it in the context that Margaret Sanger lived in. But nevertheless, my real point on that subject is, given the fact that Margaret isn't a saint, to me it doesn't make very much difference whether those particular kinds of things that you said were, in a sense, her motivation.
Really? Why is that?
Well, because I think it doesn't matter why Planned Parenthood exists, but the fact is...
So it doesn't matter if a person want to wipe out a certain race because they feel that they're inferior? That doesn't matter?
Well, it would matter if a person were actually doing that.
So if Margaret Sanger, if this is true about her, would that matter to you?
Well, personally, I don't believe it is true.
But if it's true, would it matter?
It would matter in some way, yes, absolutely.
What way would it matter to you?
Well, the way it wouldn't matter would be if I was talking about, as I think we are talking about, what Planned Parenthood is doing today.
I know, but if this is true, how would that matter?
But it isn't true of Planned Parenthood in the least.
But how about a Margaret Sanger and her intent?
Well, it would make me sort of reevaluate Margaret Sanger a little bit, but it wouldn't change my evaluation.
Would you still work for her?
What?
Would you still work for that organization?
Well, yes, because I don't think it would change my impression of what the organization does.
Really? I also read something about her. She wrote I have it right here, I think. She wrote a book or some type of proposal called Birth Control and the Negro. And at that time, she wanted to wipe out Negroes because she thought that this was in 1939, in her opinion, they were underclass people. They were, in the South at that time, they were having too many babies, and the birth control was a way for her to wipe out the Negro. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that that's untrue.
You think it's untrue?
Yes.
So if we can prove it to you that it is true, how would you feel about it? And we can prove it, but how would you feel about it?
I don't think you can prove it, but just for the sake of argument, if you did prove it, as I said, it would affect my evaluation or feelings about Margaret Sanger. It wouldn't affect my view at all about what Planned Parenthood is doing today.
So you will continue to work for an organization that you know
Absolutely.
The intent of it is to wipe out a race of people?
No. The intent is not to do that. It was never Margaret Sanger's intent, but you asked if I could prove that that was Margaret Sanger's intent, what effect it would have on my views about Planned Parenthood. The fact is, Planned Parenthood is not seeking to wipe out black people. It's seeking to do nothing of the sort. I can assure you of that absolutely.
Well, then why are most of, if not all, most of the abortion clinics are in the black and Hispanics community rather than the white community?
I don't actually know where the clinics are.
They are. I'm telling you that they are.
Well, certainly some of them are. I think they're
most of them are. Am I right about that?
That's correct. But I'd like to say something. If George is not sure what Margaret Sanger stood for, it's very easy to find out because she liked to write. And she wrote quite a few journals and quite a few newspapers. One of them she called the Birth Control Review. And in that, she really was very open about her race purification programs and thought. And she openly endorsed euthanasia, sterilization, abortion, infanticide programs for which were all, as you say, endorsed by the early Reich, German Reich, and she was in agreement with that. The problem was that after 1942, she decided she better change the name of the organization, which she at that time called the Birth Control League, because at this point it became unpopular to be racist because of what was exposed about Hitler. So at that point, she decided to change the image and change the name. And in 1942, that's when the beginning of Planned Parenthood Federation of America began. But it was, previous to that, it had been the Birth Control League, in which she was very open in her birth control review of spouting her thoughts and her philosophies. And she wanted to create a race of thoroughbreds, is one of the ways she would put it. But as far as being in these minority communities, very much so. As a matter of fact, I have one of their brochures right here. This is from a program. It's called Promotoras Comunitarias. It's for the Hispanic women, and it's located in East Los Angeles. It's a Planned Parenthood program, and I've got also some of Planned Parenthood's own words about this. They from their website on the computer. It says that the Promotoras program is both an educational and outreach program that is designed for Latinas of all ages. This woman-to-woman outreach empowers Latinas to advocate for their own health care. And promotoras are women who volunteer to undergo training to educate their families, friends, and neighbors by introducing new ways of thinking about sexuality and birth control and other things. And then it says also helps them to feel more comfortable at the Planned Parenthood centers. The Planned Parenthood center that houses this is located on Marengo, and they do...
Marcella, hold that thought for me.
Okay.
We're coming to the end of this program. We're going to do a part 2. Are you surprised to hear all this, George?
No, I'm not particularly surprised because...
Okay, well, hold that. In part 2, we'll pick up at that
All
point.
right.
Thank you very much for tuning in, and make sure you tune in next week for part 2 of the abortion issue and Margaret Singer. Have a good day. Thank you. Welcome to the program. My name is Jesse Peterson. We are doing a 2-part series on abortion and the history of Margaret Singer, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood. So if you missed last week, just call the station and they'll replay it for you. We're not going to repeat a lot of things that we talked about last week. I also wrote an article on abortion, the Black genocide. I'm founder and president of a national nonprofit organization called BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. And our purpose is to rebuild the family by rebuilding the man. We deal with every aspect of the family, and abortion is one of those aspects. I got involved with the abortion issue because I received so many phone calls in my office about young black girls who were having abortions. And so we got involved with this issue. And I just want to tell you a quick story about something that changed my heart forever. I was in front of an abortion clinic at San Vicente and Fairfax here in Los Angeles. And I was counseling with a young girl around the age of 12 to 13, black girl. She was going into the abortion clinic on a Saturday to have an abortion. And I said to her, you know, why have the abortion? You know, have the baby and we can take the baby and put it up for adoption. And she said to me that it was too late for that now, because she had gone to the clinic on a Thursday and they injected what she thought was a saline solution into her womb, her stomach. And she was about 6 to 7 months pregnant. It was apparent that she was pregnant. And she said that they had told her that it was just a fetus, it wouldn't be a big deal, you know, she couldn't afford to have a baby. And for 3 days, her baby kicked and fought for life. She can feel the baby grasping for life. And on the 3rd day, the baby died. But she said when the baby died in her womb, it just wiped her out. It mentally affected her in ways that she would never come back to her sanity again. And that broke my heart. And I made a commitment to get involved with this issue and to do all I can to turn it around, to change it. George is with George Brumder.
Right.
Is the one of the board of director of Planned Parenthood of Pasadena. I appreciate you staying overnight with me, George.
I'm happy to do it.
And doing this program again. Marcella Melendez
Right.
is board of the Hispanic for Life. Thank you for staying over. George, when you hear that story, what does that do for you?
Well, obviously it's a terrible story, but what I was saying last week and what I want to say now is that Planned Parenthood does very few abortions, and its real purpose is to help people so that abortions will not be necessary.
And when you
that's its real agenda.
When you said that, Marcella, you said that Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of abortion in the world, I guess.
In the United States, it is the #1 provider of abortions. So abortions is not a small amount of what they do.
Well, it certainly is a small amount of what we do. The fact that we may be the largest abortion provider doesn't say anything about everything else that we do.
What other things are done by Planned Parenthood?
Well, there's a tremendous amount that's done. I'm very glad that you asked.
Well,
There's a tremendous amount that's done. We do basic health care and family planning, medical services. Many women come to us for the only medical treatment they ever have. When they come to a Planned Parenthood clinic, they get a complete physical examination which reports on all the basic health of their body. Many of the people who come to Planned Parenthood never have seen another doctor and never do see another doctor.
Are all these women pregnant already?
No, they're not all
They're
pregnant.
not pregnant. They're
No,
thinking
they're not
about
all pregnant.
Okay.
What
And-
percentage of the monies in your case go to provide for abortions?
Well, I'm speaking of our affiliate, which is the only one I have numbers on. A couple of years ago, it was 4% of our total annual operating budget of something over $1 million was spent on abortion services. All the rest, as I think I said last week, is spent on other services, the basic health and medical services, the education, and then there is also, as I mentioned, the advocacy that Planned Parenthood does.
Last week,
Its real beliefs are in medical treatment and medical services for women and for men and education.
It's interesting that 4% would be used for abortion services, and I would imagine that that would be because they get money from the state for abortions. They get Medi-Cal money, so I wouldn't imagine that they would have to spend any money at all. In fact, I imagine they would be making money rather than having to spend money.
Well, we have income and we have expense. I was simply saying that 4% of our expense in that particular year was devoted to abortion, but that doesn't have anything to do with where the money comes from.
Well, the thing is that my concern is particularly in the Hispanic community. And one of the programs that bothers me quite a bit is in East Los Angeles, and this program, it's called Promotoras Comunitarias, and it is run out of the Planned Parenthood office on Marengo, where they do abortions, and they advertise abortions up to 5 months. Now, a 5-month-old baby that is delivered can very well live. I have a niece that lived, she was born premature, and she got a college, she got scholarships to Auburn University. She graduated with honors with an electrical engineering degree. Now, that little girl could very well have been killed right there in Marengo, by Planned Parenthood. The thing is that these Planned Parenthood, this program, what it does, and according to their own information, they go into the home where the woman is feeling very, very secure. And they don't bring in strangers that are going to put her at ease, make her feel uncomfortable, right? So she has her guard down. What they do is they train these women right in the community. Planned Parenthood trains them, and then gets them to hold like a little Tupperware party, that sort of situation. And they bring in their neighbors and their friends and their relatives and their comadres and their vecinas and all these people that know each other very well. They trust each other, and so their guard is down.
That's amazing.
Their guard is down. But Planned Parenthood says in the website that it is one of their most effective programs that they have. And they say that it's because it says the Innovative Promotoras program is one of the most successful outreach programs in the country because sensitive and personal information is disseminated by peers. And that's exactly what they do. They get
Well,
so
that's
that
wonderful.
they bring each other in to the abortion clinic to kill their babies up to 5 months.
No, they're not bringing people into the abortion clinic to kill babies.
Well,
as I told you before, I hope you heard me, Planned Parenthood's real aim is to prevent unintended pregnancy so there will not be a need for abortion. It is seeking to reduce abortions and make abortion as scarce as possible.
Could I just quote one more thing, please? Today, I printed this. This is from International Planned Parenthood, and these are their words. It says that what they believe, this is their aims, and it says, they're talking about International Planned Parenthood. They believe that the balance between the world's population and its natural resources and productivity is a necessary condition for improving the quality of life on the planet. The balance between the world's population, they are definitely interested in population control. And when you're talking population control, you are talking about eliminating the number of people, whether through birth control, through abortion, through sterilization.
They're not promoting abortions, I can assure you.
Why is it that they are so concerned about this balance between the population and these other natural resources and productivity?
Well, I think most people are concerned about them. But let me say again, Planned Parenthood is working to reduce the need for abortion.
How many clinics do Planned Parenthood have in helping people? You mentioned that
it has.
It
has something like 350 clinics, I think, across the nation. I'm sort of guessing. There are about 140 affiliates.
Do they refer women to other clinics who say, I don't want an abortion? Do they refer women? Or do they suggest adoption?
Yes, of course they suggest adoption.
They do suggest adoption.
I mean, I don't say they suggest it, but they speak about adoption. They speak about raising the child. They speak about an abortion. They don't advocate abortion, is what I've been saying. They just simply want the mother to make up her own mind, to be well informed, and then, as I said, to make her own informed and responsible choice.
I read someplace that in the black community, since abortion was legalized, there has been over 10 million black babies killed in the woman's womb. Is that shocking to you, George?
Well, the fact that abortion occurs doesn't really shock me.
So it's shocking to hear that in the black woman's womb, over 10 million babies have been murdered.
Well, actually, I don't know what that means.
You don't know what it means?
It sounds like a big number, but I have no idea if it's true.
But if it is true, is that shocking to you?
Oh, well, this is over how many years? 30 years?
Since abortion was
legalized.
legal.
Abortion illegal in 1973?
Yes.
So that's what, 26 years?
Is that shocking?
10 million, 26 years? Well, it's a lot of people. I think it would be better if Planned Parenthood were more...
And that is in one particular race. I'm not talking about Hispanic group.
I realize that. I think it means we should support Planned Parenthood even more.
Oh,
well, but I think you maybe didn't hear that what Planned Parenthood is seeking to do is to give people the means of avoiding unintended pregnancies.
Can I respond to that? Planned Parenthood is very, very crafty in putting out misinformation and a beautiful,
it doesn't put out any misinformation.
It doesn't put out facade. You know, we're here to help you.
Misinformation. Well, it certainly is.
But when you get right down to the bottom, helping somebody kill their baby is not a big help. I mean,
well, these are people who want you. If you think abortion is a bad thing, you should talk to the mothers who are having the abortions.
But
they're the ones who decide to have the abortions. Planned Parenthood does not decide to have the abortion.
Planned Parenthood.
There are many people who are very, very glad to have had their abortions.
Not in my experience. I worked for 6 years.
But in mine there are.
And women would come and they were totally devastated.
There are some women who are devastated.
Let's talk about the moral aspect of this whole issue.
That's an excellent idea.
I noticed that people who are in favor of abortion, not necessarily all people who have abortions, but those that are, because most people who have abortion are not necessarily in favor of abortion. But people who are in favor of abortion, they seem to be immoral people. They don't believe in God. They don't believe.
Well, that isn't true.
They don't have like.
Jesse,
let me finish it.
You said I could interrupt any time, and so I'm
going
to do that.
I'm going to give you an example.
There are large segments of the clergy who certainly favor the availability of abortion.
But they're immoral clergy, though. Let me show you.
Well, you may call them that, but they don't call them that.
Let me show you this. Most of them women who are in favor of abortion, they hate men. You know, they hate the family, the idea of the family. A lot of them are homosexuals and drug addicts and things like that who seem to lack values. Does that mean anything about this whole issue? Is that
Well, it's
the
not
reason
true.
that?
It's not true. What you say is simply not true.
Is that true?
You have a very distorted view, I think, of the whole subject, in fact.
I've never met a moral person that is in favor of abortion. Can you name one?
Well, the vast majority of people who have abortions, I'm sure, are highly
No,
moral.
not necessarily who have them, because a lot of people are convinced to have them, and they're not necessarily in favor of it. But I'm talking about the ones that encourages abortion. Can you name a moral person?
Well, I don't know anyone who encourages abortion.
You want to respond to that?
Planned Parenthood does, and they do it very
No, Planned
effectively.
Parenthood doesn't.
They go into the schools,
Well,
they talk to the children, they
They're
tell
not
them you
encouraging
have,
abortion.
Just hold on a
they
minute,
tell the
Joyce.
children that they have rights. They have
They do
rights
have
to
rights.
confidential medical
They
services.
do have rights, and
Do
they
you
should
know-
have them.
George,
You know
hold on
what
just
the
a moment.
confidential medical services are, though? You
Well,
probably don't know. Okay, the children...
Why would you think I wouldn't know what the
Well,
services that
well,
my
then
organization
tell
provides?
me what are the confidential medical services that children are entitled to without the parents' knowledge or
Well,
consent?
let me say, first of all, that Planned Parenthood does encourage everyone, young people particularly, to involve their parents. Planned Parenthood is not anti-family. Planned Parenthood actually is for the good of the community, and it believes that one way to do this is to have the young people and their parents have a good relationship.
But isn't that the
It does
purpose
not
of these
see-
school-based
it does not
clinics,
see-
and to keep the parent out?
Absolutely not. It's preposterous to suggest that it is.
Marcella, I'll let you respond to that when we
It's
come back from the
preposterous.
break.
I will.
We're going
I
to take a break, and we'll be back in a moment.
Jesse Peterson is the founder of Bond, the Brotherhood organization of a new destiny. For information, write P.O. Box 35090, Los Angeles, California 90035, or call 1-800-411-BOND.
As I
She
say,
said, she meant what she
Okay,
said.
we are
But
back.
she's often taken out of
We are
context.
back. Hold on. We are back, and we're doing the last 15 minutes of this program on abortion. Again, I did an article in my newsletter on the abortion and black genocide, and people can get a free copy of this by calling the 800 number there on the program of this. Abortion is a very serious issue, and I think that it is time that we really deal with it. I asked before going to break, isn't the purpose of the school-based clinics is to keep the parents out of the issue of abortion when it's concerning their children? You said no. Marcella, you say what to that?
I say yes.
And why do you say yes?
Well, 13 years ago, I had two children in our local school, one in the middle school and one in the high school, and the two schools were on the same campus. When I became aware that they were going to put a school-based clinic on campus, and the purpose was for abortion referrals and contraceptives. And I began to ask questions, began to go to the school board, because I had not been notified. I had two children. They should have notified me, if not for one, for the other.
Right.
And so I felt if this is being done quietly, there's got to be something to these charges. And I went to find out, and of course the school board and all the promoters of the clinic claimed that it was not about the contraceptives, it was not about abortion referrals, it was about sick children who were too sick to learn and their parents didn't care. And they said, but that's not you, so don't worry about it. If you don't want your children to go to the clinic, just don't sign them up. Well, what happened was, shortly after the clinic opened, we found out that the director of the clinic was a doctor from UCLA. And George, would you tell me what kind of doctor do you think this person specialized in? What field?
I wouldn't have any idea.
Wouldn't you think it would be pediatrics or family health or one of those general?
What did he specialize in?
Well, this doctor is an OBGYN, obstetrician gynecologist, who does abortions at UCLA. And this is the director of the school-based clinic that I was told had nothing to do with abortions or contraceptives. Well, the thing is that that right away showed me that there was a lot of dishonesty going on. What we were being told and the reality were two different things. We were being assured, don't worry about it, we're good people, we're here to help your children, but the reality is that in California, children have a right to confidential medical services. They have a right to go behind their parents' backs with the help of the clinic and the people in the clinic, to go off campus to get their abortions, to do all these things while the parent thinks their child is attending school. They can get services for drugs, alcohol services, contraceptives, abortion, and mental health. Those are the 5 areas that are considered confidential medical services for children. What happened was I kept being told, don't worry about it, you don't want your child to participate. Well, one day I dropped my son off at school. He was in the 7th grade. And that day I received a telephone call from the school saying your child was missing 1 or more classes today. When my husband came home from work, I said to him, we received a phone call. Apparently our son was not at school. And so we waited for him to come home and we asked him, we said, what happened? Didn't you go to school? And he said, of course I did. Mom, you dropped me off. And I said, well, we received a phone call saying that you had been absent. And he said, oh, that. Oh, I was pulled out of my history class to go to the school-based clinic. Well, can you imagine how my husband and I felt after that? We had been reassured. First of all, this is not about contraceptives, this is not about abortions, and if you don't want to participate, just simply don't sign. Those were all the assurances we had been given. Plus the fact we were told, you're not going to have to pay for it. Taxpayers will not have to pay. Well, the legislature just passed a law, and we will have to pay. It is going to be on the taxpayers' backs. But the point is this, we cannot trust the people. The woman, the doctor,
what people are you speaking
the director, that is the OBGYN, that was the first director of this particular school-based clinic, is a past president of Planned Parenthood professionals. So there's the Planned Parenthood connection right there. And saying that, oh, it has nothing to do, we're up front, we want the children to talk to the parents. The kids were told repeatedly, you don't have to tell your parents. You have a right to these services with or without your parents' consent. They kept instilling in them, it's not necessary to tell your parents.
You want to respond to that, George?
Well, yes, I do want to respond to it, because Planned Parenthood is extremely responsible in what it does, and it is not dishonest, as you're suggesting. It is not underhanded in any way. And it is working honestly for the well-being of the individual people and their families. And it does do a tremendous amount of good in the world for people and their families. And it is true, it puts a high emphasis on confidentiality. And it does that because in cases where children cannot talk to their families, they need to have the availability of the services nevertheless, or perhaps even especially. But Planned Parenthood certainly does not encourage children.
Let me ask this.
Let me finish. Planned Parenthood does not encourage people to go behind, young people to go behind their parents' back.
Let me ask
this. It is never suggesting anything, well, I shouldn't say never, because individual people give these services, and I don't know what absolutely everyone says. But in terms of policy, its policy is to be completely frank and above board. And it does promote strong families. It wants there to be strong families and strong communities.
What gives Planned Parenthood the right to even think for a moment that they can keep parent and children apart?
It isn't attempting to do that. It's trying to do exactly the opposite.
Are they encouraging the kid to go to their parents?
Yes, indeed they are.
Rather than keeping them away?
Absolutely. Absolutely they are.
Well, as I said before, they're very, very good at a very slick campaign in promoting themselves, and most people think Planned Parenthood is a very good organization.
Of course they do.
But that is.
But I don't know how they can think though. When you look at the type of people that run Planned Parenthood.
Before 1942.
People like me, for example.
But I don't know you personally, but I've never found a decent person who is involved.
Well, Jesse, I think you should look harder then.
In Planned Parenthood.
I think you should look harder, because there are many, virtually everyone involved in Planned Parenthood is a very decent person. I've been closely connected with this organization for 3 years. I go to conferences locally, in the state, and nationally, and there are hundreds of Planned Parenthood volunteers at these events, and staff people also, and they are wonderful people. There's absolutely no question that they're wonderful people.
I would say that they are being misled, because before 1942 it was obvious what Planned Parenthood was about. Well, it wasn't going by that name.
I don't think it's obvious at all what
it was very
about.
Much the Birth Control League and the Review, the magazine, the newspaper they put out was very clear in what their motives were. They were racist, white supremacists.
Well, they're certainly not that now. I don't think they were that then.
In 1942,
I don't think they were that then, and they certainly aren't that now.
Well, people can find, you got all this information from their website, right?
You can get it from the internet.
Well, go look at it yourself, Jesse.
Yeah.
Go look at it
I've already have it.
But I would like to recommend.
The information is true, unless Margaret Sanger is lying on herself. Because she wrote this stuff, she wrote it herself.
Could I recommend, if people really want to know, it's already been researched. We don't have to go through the research, because the research has been done for us.
But here's another book that people want to read.
One at a time.
This one is called Woman of Valor.
Hold on.
Well, This is completely documented, and it has more footnotes than any book I've ever read. It's very well researched. It's called Grand Illusions, the Legacy of Planned Parenthood. And if anybody wants to know anything about Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger, you don't need to do your own research. It has been done, but you can check out all the references because they're there, and you can go to the library and go to the original sources. And Margaret Sanger liked to write, so it's a good thing for us because she herself spoke and she told of her own beliefs, racist beliefs.
And you have a book.
Well, this book is also a very good book about, well, I wouldn't say also, it is a very good book. It's called Woman of Valor, Margaret Sanger and the Birth Control Movement in America. And it's written by a woman named Ellen Chesler, who graduated from Vassar and then has a master's and a PhD degree from Columbia. And it's a very well-regarded book, and I think it's undoubtedly quite accurate. So this is the source I would go to. I don't know anything about that book. I don't know if it's a reliable book or not.
Let me ask
As
George.
I've said several times in this interview, there is a great deal of misinformation about Margaret Sanger, and I wouldn't disagree that, I mean, if she's quoted, if she wrote something herself, I'm sure she wrote it. I wouldn't question that.
I have one
but
more quick
often
question, George,
phrases
because
of
of
hers are
time.
taken out of context and they're misinterpreted. And the main point about it is, though, it really doesn't matter. What Planned Parenthood is doing does not depend in any way on what Margaret Sanger ever did or said, really.
And so what you're saying then, if the KKK or the skinheads want to do what they do in a different way, they can do it because the originator of the skinhead, his idea doesn't matter anymore?
Well, if Margaret's, to the extent
saying
Margaret's
that?
saying, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, though, that to the extent Margaret Sanger may have expressed racist and eugenic sort of attitudes, those are completely irrelevant to what Planned Parenthood is doing.
I have one more question about morality, then we're going to talk about solution. We have about 3 minutes left. And I want to ask both, do you, George, believe in God?
I don't believe in God.
You don't believe in God. And how about you?
Definitely.
You do believe in God. That's another thing. I have not met one person who believes in abortion and promotes it that believes in God. Why is that?
I have no idea. And as I've said, I've never met anyone who promotes abortion.
Okay. Solution to abortion. How can we end abortion?
We need to prevent unintended pregnancies. We need to give people the education and the tools that they can use so that they will not become pregnant when they're not prepared to raise the child that would result from the pregnancy. And that's exactly what Planned Parenthood's main effort is directed at. It's trying to enable people to have the power so they can make their decision about when they will have a child and when they won't. And
Okay.
that is basically it.
Marcella, solution to abortion. How can we end it?
We have to reinstill morality, and young people should be told, don't just because you have a right and you have a right to contraceptives and a right to do all these things behind your parents' back. It's not in your best interest. All the contraceptives in the world are not really going to protect you. They won't protect your soul for sure. And the condoms are so faulty that they won't protect them from AIDS. They're being told you can be protected from AIDS, but the AIDS virus is so tiny that it's smaller than the voids in a natural latex condom. So the voids are so big, the AIDS virus can just go in and out with no problem. But the thing is that children are being lied to. They're being told you have a right to your sexual expression and to all this enjoyment, but it's not true. They pay a big price, many times with their own lives. But even if they did not get any of the 24 sexually transmitted diseases that are out of control right now in this country, they're still going to suffer the emotions of getting involved with numerous people, and also they're going to suffer spiritually. There's no protection for that.
In the 1 minute that I have left, I think the solution is, just to add to what you guys have already said, we need to rebuild the family. We need to put fathers and mothers back in the home together to raise their children, in the right way. Because when you raise kids in the right way and they go out into the world, they cannot be influenced, by people with perverted ideas, whatever it may be. So we definitely need to rebuild the family. We need to change the law on abortion. And the reason that it needs to become illegal because a lot of people lack morals and they need to be governed by the law because they're not self-governed. And so we need law to help people maintain themselves. Now that the law is okay to have an abortion, it is out of control. So we need to change the law in order to turn it around. I appreciate you coming on. We're out of time. Thank you very much for being with us, with me.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right. Yeah, oh, yeah, all fast.